Now we're going inward in the European Union, looking at regional languages and what are the problems with them, and outward looking, going beyond the European Union, going outside in the world and see what is the situation in countries that have a large number of official languages and an even larger number, in some cases, of regional languages and how they deal with them. So the panel includes representatives of both these directions, let's say, the inward and the outward direction. We have Mrs. Swaran Lata, who is head of the Technology Development Program for Indian Languages for the Department of Information Technology in the Government of India, and who will be talking to us about the situation in a country where there is no national language practically, but there are 22 official languages and 29 languages spoken by more than 1 million. So we're talking about different sizes compared to European Union problems. Then we have a presentation, or we have the pleasure to have with us Justus Roux from the Northwest University, who is a member of the Human Language Technology Expert Panel of the South African government. And there we're talking about a country that has a population of 50 million and 11 official languages. But these are spoken by 99% of the population. Now, going inward, we have Mrs. Marta Xirinachs, which is better in Greek than I am in Catalan, because it just spoke to me in Greek, who represents Linguamón, the House of Languages of the government of Catalonia. There we have 11.5 million speakers in 2006, from what I have seen. And this is Catalan is a co-official language in the Spanish region. So it's official, but not at the level, I mean, towards the outside, the externally of the country. And we also have Mr. Jeremy Evas, who represents the Welsh Language Board. Welsh is an official language in Wales with 750,000 speakers, from what I've found, more or less, no? Okay. I have to admit that I visited the website and I was impressed to see that there was an introduction in 42 languages, which shows an opening from the regional level to the world, I would say. So I would like to ask first the representatives of India and South Africa to make a statement on what do you do for languages, how you plan language technologies, how you initiate programs, and how you fund the activities that you have in this domain. And I would just like to say at this stage that to remind everybody that South Africa and India are eligible countries for FP7 projects, for research projects, so there may be possibilities for collaboration going beyond simple advice or looking into each other's work. Okay, thank you.
Hello, good morning to all of you. The Constitution of India provides the agenda for planned development of Indian languages for use in all spheres of life. It also talks about linguistic and cultural maintenance of the diversity. So we are supposed to maintain the cultural diversity and the multilingual culture of the country. And we want to provide equal opportunities to citizens through the use of information technology, for which the support of Indian languages on the ICT is an essential requirement. The Official Languages Act of the government in 1963 passed Hindi as an official language, And there were 15 Indian languages in the 8th schedule on which the government recognizes the 15 languages. Then 3 more were added in 1992 and 4 more were added in 2003. So you can see that now the 22 Indian languages are in the schedule, and this area got under focus of technology development in Indian languages in the year 1988. 1991, we produced our first Indian language standard of representing the Indian language text in the computer. So that was ISCI, corresponding to ASCII. That was a 7-bit, 8-bit, text storage. Later on, in 1991, a separate research program was started called Technology Development for Indian Languages Program. So that time it was envisaged that we need to build a large amount of corpora in Indian languages, and technology was very premature. So something was done, but as you listen from others, there were issues of copyright, the corporas were not validated, so those corporas are sometimes stored in the proprietary fonts, so they could not be utilized much. Then from 1995 to 2000, we had some proof of research concept projects funded in the areas of machine translation, OCR. The researchers would be too ambitious to talk about the handwritten text, but it was a challenge even to recognize the laser printed text. So these proof of concept projects and the corpora building up to 2000, we had only 8 to 13 institutions involved in this work. Then 2000 to 2005, we focused on capacity building in various state governments, because language is a state subject and each state has its own language, first language, second and third language. So the mandate lies with the state, whereas this program is nationally funded. And from the state government side, there is very little initiative in this area. So translation right now is mostly done by the humans. And because of the employment factors also, people encourage human translations because they feel that if technology is too much used, then the people will be thrown out of the jobs. So that's another point which is considered. So from 2005, we increased the number of institutions to 30, working all over the country. Now, currently we have 85 institutions across the country working with us in various states. And especially when the language work is to be done, it is the respective institutions in the states which need to be roped in, because they have the knowledge of the language and linguistics of that area. So 2006, we took a little organized approach in the development of the technology. We started funding the consortium mode projects. The earlier phase, we gave some funding for Hindi mostly, which is the national language. And when we saw that whatever work was done for Hindi was tightly bound to the language, so those things could not be utilized much. Later on in 2006, we started talking of multiple institutional and multilingual projects, where each project would talk about at least 6 to 8 Indian languages. And it was tried that one leading institution which was having the technical capacity to lead the whole work, and all the states of those 6 languages, the institutions participated, and they did more language-specific work, and wherever the capability existed, the technology components were also handled by them. So the consortium leader is given funding by the TDIL, and funding is attributed to all the other institutes with a given role assigned to each of the institutes. And the leading institution distributes the money further to those institutes depending on their performance. So more accountability was brought in, and language independent engines were tried to the extent possible. But Indian languages are very complex, much more complex than the European languages, because they are highly phonetic. There are a number of conjunct characters, number of matras which are added on top and bottom and left and right. So the language complexity is much, much higher than the European languages. Then we have to do every work from the scratch, like we say, an issue we have to get started. So we started working parallelly on the standardization efforts, because standards are very necessary to take technology to the market. So we started participating in the year 2000 in Unicode. So Unicode, we have been able to produce all the 22 Indian languages, plus the Vedic Sanskrit, which is the cultural heritage language, although not covered in 22 languages. So we have incorporated all those languages into Unicode by close coordination with the Unicode Consortium, and I was representing in Unicode, and I worked with the language and linguistic experts across the country to finalize those recommendations. So this was, the result was that we got connected with a very large language and linguistic community within the country. So on the technology side, we have done some beta deployments on the machine translations. As the DG translation office had given the presentation in the prior session, we are also bogged down with the same problems that if you apply a rule-based approach, you are able to achieve some success, but no individual approach, whether it's statistical, whether it's rule-based. We also have tritary adjoining grammar-based approaches. So none of the approach makes you reach 100%. So hybrid approaches are also being tried. In one of the consortia, we are trying multiple engines. The same input is given to the multiple engines. And yesterday, somebody talked of mixing the engines and leveraging the translation of various engines. So we are only prioritizing. We are giving the input to various engines, and the output, we are evaluating which engine gives the best. So that best result is produced to the user. So we also have the problem of getting multiple translations out of the engines, and if these multiple translations are shown for post-editing, so then translators can probably edit these tools. But currently the level of technology is not so good that translators are not finding it lucrative to use this, because they feel that the post-editing effort is much higher than translating it themselves. So the stage of translation is too early, but definitely we have made some success by limited deployments. In our parliament, we have deployed a system where the main 2-3 documents which are placed before the parliament can be translated from English to Hindi, because parliament works in English and Hindi, the official language. The state level, all parliaments work in their English and local language, so that stage we have not yet reached. Then we have provided the machine translation systems to the public for general feedback through the data center, that is the website of the TDIL, very recently for crowdsourcing. So not a very encouraging response is there. But definitely we are trying to open up more towards deployments and the public feedback. And we have tried 2 new areas of research during last 3-4 years. One is cross-lingual information access, because we feel that the information from outside the world is mostly available in English. So through the translation, if it's converted into the Indian languages, and then through the cross-lingual search and access and retrieval, the Indian people can access the information on the internet. The connectivity of the internet right now is very low. We have a broadband which has reached only up to 10 million subscription base, whereas we have 1 billion population. Telephone subscriber base has really increased to 706 million. So wireless base is also increasing very gradually, taking over the landline subscriber base. So we feel that if the future solutions are provided on the mobiles, it will have a wider access. But the mobiles again work in English only. So we have to do a lot of work in the mobile and speech area in the coming future to see how Indian languages can be supported on the mobile. So from that point of view, we have also become we have opened a W3C India office, World Wide Web Consortium India office. So the government is focusing more on the technology development and also on the enablement task and the standardization. We are far away from the deployment right now. And I think the state governments also have their own challenges. The e-governance in the country is being implemented right now. The central government is funding these initiatives and also issuing the broad guidelines. But the will of the state government determines whether those e-governance applications are being implemented in English, and many places they are doing it English and few applications in Indian languages. But some of the state governments are very particular. They are deploying applications only in the local language, such as Gujarat, Kerala, and Bengal to some extent. But there are mixed examples, and the will of the state government is the major driving factor in this case. But in the long run, we all realize that the e-governance has to happen in Indian languages if it has to reach the masses. Currently, the situation is because of the low PC penetration and low broadband and internet penetration. The major population in the rural and semi-urban areas is still not having the reach to the ICT. So the demand from their side to get ICT in Indian languages is not yet there. But because of the e-governance initiatives, now there is a general feeling that we need to provide Indian language support on each and every platform. So our agenda is very long, and we are very far away, and we have just got started in our initiatives. For last 10 years, we have made some effective progress. And I feel that, lot more involvement from the state governments is required, which still needs to be mobilized so that a larger penetration of the technology can take place. And the government is trying to put up the 20 mission mode projects under e-governance, and citizen service centers are being set up at the village level. So 8 villages have access to 1 CSC. So the ICT penetration will increase because of the CSCs, because as and when the people start accessing the e-governance services in the local language, so the access to CSC will make them access the technology. They may not afford the PCs or laptops individually. So the community level access will become available. Already the cyber cafes in the cities have become very common, and the children today access all the information online for admissions, for applications and everything. So the penetration is increasing. The Indian language efforts, the government is paying more and more attention, more and more funds are being granted. But there is a lack of scientists in the country to work in this area, because there is no, people like to work more in the latest areas like nanotechnology, or globally the areas which are more, forward-looking in the research side. People like to work in those areas. So computer scientists, out of passion, a large group of scientists is working in this area with us and is receiving funding from us. And we are seeding more and more institutions through the consortia projects. As far as languages are concerned, there are 11 languages which are majorly in use. So out of that mostly 8 to 9 languages are covered in most of the projects. So for the lesser resourced languages, we are trying to build corporas. We are trying to start consortia under mentoring of these, ICT people. The language and linguistic people are brought to work under their umbrella so that they can be provided standards, tools, and guiding principles to build those resources. Now we are careful about the copyright issues. We are trying to produce copyright-free corporas so that they can be utilized for research without any problem and can be distributed. So everybody can look up our data center, tdil-dc.in, where we have provided all these services and the resources and the tools. This website was put up last November because whatever research efforts had taken place now have been consolidated and are being disseminated through this website. So we have lots to do and lots to learn from the initiatives being taken in the Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So it's good to learn from the outside that there are the same problems, plus, I would say, internet penetration, which is an additional issue for you. Yeah.
And adaptability.
Yes. Yes, if you can continue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Perhaps I should just clarify my position. I'm not in government as such. I'm an academic, but we're part of a panel that advises government on human language technologies issues. Perhaps just to give some background, before 1994, South Africa had 2 official languages, which was English and Afrikaans. And with the new political dispensation in 1994, a new constitution was accepted, and which stated that there were 11 official languages. That is 9 of the indigenous languages, or pure African languages, as well as English and Afrikaans. Now, Mr. Chair, the motivation for doing this is purely acknowledging the cultural, human and linguistic rights of minority groups in a country, of the larger minority groups. And in a perspective there, yes, you said 50 million, it's approximately, we're not quite sure, we're in a census now, 48 to 50 million people. English and Afrikaans, English is only ranked 5th as a mother tongue in the country, although in business and industry it's used quite widely. Afrikaans is ranked 3rd, and then we have larger groups which languages are mutually understandable. The Nguni group, which consists of Zulu, Xhosa, Swati, and Ndebele, and then the Sotho languages, which are cross-border languages with Botswana at Lesotho, for instance. And then again, Venda and Tsonga, again, cross-border languages with Mozambique, for instance, and Zimbabwe to a certain extent. I think one point that one can make, given this constitution, and people feel very passionate very often about their languages. And if the language is not used officially as it's supposed to be, we've had court cases taking to the government to the Constitutional Court to address these issues, and it's an ongoing process. Now, the language technologies, the drive for that, as I've mentioned, is since 2000 there's been an academic drive, and I think to a large extent it also comes from the first LREC conference, which was in Granada, and where the necessity of really building corpora for languages was stressed, and I think the academics took this up to a very large extent. So in 2003, government set up a national language policy framework was adopted by Cabinet, and specifically mention was made to language technology development. And from that, a number of infrastructures were set up, the Pan-South African Language Board, then there's a National Language Service. Furthermore, for each of the languages, national lexicographic units, all supposed to develop the language in one way or the other. And then there was also a group, the participation also towards standardization in TC 37 of ISO. At this point in time, there are mainly 2 departments that are involved in HLT development. And most appropriate, the one department, Department of Arts and Culture, looking at the languages, and the Department of Science Technology, looking at the technologies. Now, and there's some cooperation, obviously, between the 2 departments. In Department of Science Technology, there's been 10 running projects, all from a technological nature. Resources, there's been a resource audit on tools and other resources which were explained and presented at LREC 2010. As far as the arts and culture is concerned, basically focusing on resource development. There's specifically looking at text and speech and also multimodal to follow. But remember, at this point in time, it's for 10 languages at a time, excluding English for obvious reasons. Some machine translation projects have been commissioned by government, also specifically in the governmental domain, so as to make, in terms of the Constitution, to make available the government notices, etc., all in the particular language. We've now reached a point where, apart from the resources that's being developed, there's a resource management agency that's to be established this year still. The calls for proposals will be going out within the next month. And the whole idea is to manage this in a, shall I say, a small ELRA type of, or LDC type of organization. We do hope to have good cooperation with European colleagues. We're specifically working or looking towards a cooperation with the Dutch Language Union. And obviously the MetaNet and MetaShare would also very much be a good link that we could link into. I'm ending off by just mentioning a few problems. Obviously limited resources, resource-scarce languages. Capacity building is a problem. We don't have the expertise as we should have. Again, looking at the funding for 10 languages. On a technical point, what we've experienced in terms of systems that's been developed, information systems, telephone-based systems requiring speech recognition as well as text-to-speech, is the problem of a very frequent problem of code switching and code mixing. And it was mentioned here this morning as well. And that obviously puts some strain on these systems as such. The challenges and priorities seems to be machine translation as far as we can get. Statistical machine translation projects are running at this point in time. And then also, as in India, mobile applications. This is, as we see this as a future, South Africa is already oversubscribed. More than 100% of the community have mobile phones, and specifically also bearing in mind that there are quite low, in certain areas, low literacy level. It just stands to reason that one can use speech, or you should use speech on your mobile phones, or text-to-speech systems embedded there to take up the challenge. I think there's one thing that we may have learned. We came in rather late in the process, but it was possible to learn from what has happened in other parts of the world specifically. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then I would suggest we go inward to Catalonia and Mrs. Xirinachs.
Thank you very much. First of all, let me to introduce in a few words Linguamón House of Languages. Linguamón was established 2005 by the Catalan government and the Barcelona City Council to increase global awareness of the values of multilingualism. Just to summarize it, I will tell you some words about Linguamón's work. We divide our work in three main areas of activity. Two of them, they are far from this, the activity of this meeting, but the first one is the disseminating the universal values of languages. And this line of work encompasses our museum project, exhibitions, cultural programs, as well as audiovisual productions. The second one is multilingualism and society. And this project involves how to manage different multilingualism realities. All the society has changed a lot. And just to give you an example, in 1995, we were 6 million inhabitants, and now we are more than 7 million. And the rate of the immigrants is the 16% of our population, and we have at least 200 different languages as a mother tongue in our schools. And the third area of work, more connected to this meeting, it's languages, technology, and business. And the main project of this line of work is we are building a cluster on multilingualism in Catalonia. Many people refer to the Catalan language as being a small one, but we prefer to be called or classified as a medium-sized language. As Mr. Pilos said, there are 11 million people understand Catalan language and 9 million people speak this language. These figures allow us to establish a parallel with other languages such as Hungarian, Swedish, or Greek, and others. However, we know that there exist other factors, in particular political and social aspects, that must also be considered. I thought it was interesting to summarize the main challenges that Catalan faces in this field of language technology. I will select 6 of them that I think they are the main challenge that Catalan faces. The first one is the loss of the market. As you know, companies used to offer their products to the large market because they are being a much more profitable market. There is also a lack of interest from the majority of the business world to invest in small or medium-sized languages. Another factor is the low social demand for products. As you know, we have an official bilingualism, and all Catalan speakers are fluent in Spanish, so they can use the Spanish language. That's sometimes the reason why the companies don't do their product in Catalan. Another challenge is the research and development. It's in the majority is based only on the academic wall, with little connection with the socioeconomic wall. And sometimes the technology exists, but need to be turned into a real product. As the last one, maybe there are more than that, but just to put another one, I would add that there is a general lack of communication among the actors involved. The companies don't know what kind of technology has been developed by the research groups sometimes. The research groups sometimes duplicate efforts, and there is a big gap between developers and final users. We need to improve our coordination and collaboration policies because are necessary for all languages, but more necessary for medium or small languages. 2 years ago, took place in Barcelona a Catalan workshop promoted by researchers, and 2 proposals arose from the meeting. One was the creation of a web portal to bring together all the information concerning to the Catalan language technology. And the other one was the creation of an association able to voice the needs. These proposals have, or following these proposals and the spirit of these proposals, lets me to introduce the Linguamón new project that we are developing, a multilingualism cluster with language industry companies, research groups, public administration, and other support partners. We are doing it because we want to make language industry companies more competitive, and we want to attract trade from the global market to improve the quality of languages and to attract more multinationals to our territory and create new jobs. The size of, well, we have been working in this project and very close with all the involved there, and we have been carrying interviews with more than 40 companies and all the research group. We have at least 14 research groups. The main are devoted to the written system, to the written Catalan language, and 3 of them work both in Catalan and speech data. This just to go to the state of the affairs, there are some positive factors. There is only that language technology in Catalan, I think they are in better shape than could be expected, considering the former factors. Very important research groups on Spanish are based in Catalan universities, and they have found opportunities to work also on Catalan on the site. And there are some very active associations and non-profit organizations that work for normalizing our language. And also, I think it has been a good fact, the purchasing policy of the Catalan public administration has been a benefit for the Catalan language. They promote in front of equal products, they promote the Catalan ones. Well, I could give you more data about the size of our industry companies, but I think maybe it's...
Thank you. And now it's Welsh.
Thank you very much. My presentation contains merely 5 bullet points, 3 of my own and 2 I've stolen from a presenter yesterday. The first 3, who am I, what am I for, why am I here, and the 2 I've stolen so far, and what next for the smaller languages of Europe. I work for the Welsh Language Board. It's a government organisation in Cardiff in Wales. I'm Interim Director of Policy and Terminology there. My background is in language planning and policy and brain-friendly language teaching methodologies. I come to technology over the last 8 years after having run my own translation company using translation memory and still not being able to understand why anyone doesn't use it. And then at the board, technology, why? I was project manager for the language interface packs for Microsoft Office, Windows and SharePoint. The contact for our dealings with Google on the Google Translator Toolkit, which is a wonderful little tool. I'm the author of the strategic plan for language technology, published in 2006, and we're going to have to publish a new one soon, so I shall be talking to you, Marta Xirinachs, about what you've been doing in Catalonia. And also I had the pleasure of working with Professor Harold Summers. Some of you will be aware of his work. He was then the editor of the International Journal on Machine Translation, and he wrote an excellent report for us on machine translation in Welsh, similar to what you were describing about the hybrid systems. Okay, I've also recently been in New Zealand working at the University of Waikato on Maori language technology and take-up of Maori language technology, because as I'll talk later on, technology may be available, but because of long-standing mentalities and social-cultural conditioning in bilingual areas, some people don't tend to use provision, not just technology that's available. One of my most recent tasks was to be co-author of a technical advice note on bilingual technology. Note bilingual. It deals with machine translation for bilingual areas, deals with how to present information bilingually on Web 2 platforms, sharing translation memories, and bilingual website design, giving equality of experience to different language groups in the same geographical area, in the same town, in the same street. So we've been talking yesterday about whether Europe's languages, smaller languages, are in danger. They are. So bring on the money, as someone said yesterday. We've been talking about smaller states. We've been talking about regional unilingualism, Croatia, Hungary, and things like that. But Wales is one of many officially bilingual areas. It's only been officially bilingual since February of this year, thanks to Her Majesty the Queen authorising the new Welsh language law. So thank you very much, Her Majesty, for that. But if we look back to yesterday's presentation from the Swiss lady who couldn't be here because she's probably in school now and she won't be able to be until 2022. She mentioned that certain languages are relegated to the rural, the personal and church affairs. Some people believe that Welsh or Breton or historically Catalan or Basque or other languages shouldn't be used in the modern sphere. And my job is all about normalizing that. And their mentality goes back actually to romantic nationalism and the nation state, and formed a formed a construct called diglossia, where the same language is spoken, two languages are spoken in the same area, but they have different social functions. One language, English in my case, has high social functions, Welsh has low social functions. So my reason for being here is that I believe that language provision in Welsh or Breton or Basque or Catalan is part of social justice, and I think that technology has a lot to play. So that's why I'm here. Here's the so far. What's been done for Welsh? Which technologies have been initiated or improved? Well, we have a massively successful volunteer translation community who's translated OpenOffice, who's translated Facebook. We have been dealing with the translation automation user societies, and my own organisation, the Welsh Language Board, is about to publish a translation memory sharing platform on its website. Bangor University have done some sterling work. There is a review of local government which has recently been carried out. There are 22 local authorities in Wales, and one of the things it says, amongst many other recommendations for sharing resources, and I'll oversimplify, there are 22 translation units translating the same council tax form 22 times. This can't be sensible. Everyone here will be aware of the possibilities that sharing translation memories in the cloud or the sky, as we heard yesterday, will offer for that. More of that later, and the economies of scale. So we have LIPS, we have Google in Welsh, we have Google Translated Toolkit, which is different to Google Translate, as many of you will know, but I always make the difference because I'm never stop being surprised people don't understand the difference between the two. We have a high-quality speech synthesis in Welsh from the Royal National Institute of the Blind. We have T9 predictive texting in Welsh, but unfortunately it needs the phone manufacturers to install it on their telephone handsets, and they haven't done so apart from in one case. So if we were to envisage a MetaNet white paper for Welsh, for a small language, like Catalan actually, Welsh is doing pretty well. But as the MetaNet documentation says, we are still one of those languages which run the risk of becoming excluded and victims of the digital age because they're underrepresented online. Right, how do we deal with that? Here's the what next. I think we, at the very, very least, need a massive scale sharing of translation memories between the public and the private sector in Wales, with machine translation plugged in for post-editing, and with your help. So thank you very much for the invitation. Where do I sign? I want to join. We've got to reuse, we've got to recycle, we've got to use machine translation in a virtuous circle of perfecting. We need to encourage translators to use the technology which is already available, similar to what you're saying, because some have historically seen it as a threat, much less so now. It's not. There's enough work to go around to normalise the linguistic landscape in Wales for all translators, and more coming up. And we need to add the hybrid systems you talked about with the 3 rules-based, statistical-based, example-based machine translation, offering a synthesis via the equation whose name I can't remember, to translators to the human eye. So, right, we also have standards and guidelines for bilingual computing. It's talking about Welsh. We've shared it with the Basque government, the Irish government, the Scottish Gaelic community, the Scottish government. If any of you are from bilingual areas and would like to use it, just tell me and we can do a global replace for your language, because so many of the principles are the same. Also, I sit, as have you done historically, on the Network for the Promotion of Linguistic Diversity, which represents very, very many of the millions upon millions, the tens of millions of minority language speakers in Europe, so from Basque to Catalans to Corsicans to Friulians, and more coming. And what I would be interested in exploring with you is how we can cooperate to structure language data, to share language data, to use your platforms for all those. I think this is a wonderful opportunity for social justice, for normalization of all those language and the linguistic heritage of the world. So, while I can't espouse a future where lawnmowers form their own Facebook group, well, I suppose I could if they did it in Welsh, as we heard yesterday. There's lots going on. There's so many possibilities. It's really interesting. Let's do it. So if we unite together, and if you haven't read the MetaNet sharing charter and the memorandum of understanding, do it. I couldn't agree more with anything. It's a fantastic document, making publicly funded resources freely available, sharing, then we can really change the linguistic landscape of Europe and beyond. So to finish, language is much more than content. It frames the way we think. It's the cornerstone of our identity, and forums such as this have got a massive contribution to make to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Sharing is the key word of your speech. Identifying, preparing language resources was everywhere. I think in all speeches. Solving the legal problems is an issue for governments, probably. Organizing, sharing, and involving volunteers is an issue for other types of organizations, but also for governments. You mentioned already some of the contributions of MetaNet, of a network like MetaNet, first through the white papers, and I think this is already a significant contribution. I mean, as we have run out of time, I would just mention these elements. I would like to open the floor. I would not like to ask any specific questions myself, but open the floor if there are questions in the audience, please. Yeah? Nothing? Okay, it was, I mean, oh, yes, please.
Okay, maybe regarding the, should I say regional languages? I don't know. Well, you don't have the chance. You don't have the chance to be a official European Union language, so you are not covered by the activities within the Commission or the European bodies. So, I mean, if there were to, if we were to invest in order to cover the necessary language technologies regarding your languages, how do you see this, the economical model? Do you think that the Commission should make an extra effort to also consider those languages? Or do you think that there should be, that could be a shared effort with your regions where the languages are spoken? Do you think that the governmental bodies there could participate in the necessary effort to cover those languages?
Yes, I just want to add to this, because it was one of my questions. How do you see the role of the private part, the sector as well, if there is any? Because I think that everybody...
Three-part question. Okay. The answer to your question is yes. I do see a role for the European Union funding institutions, and they have already funded some programs for Welsh and Irish and other language through the Interreg program, and I think I would applaud that and espouse their addition into other mainstream language funding. To our regional governments, the Generalitat de Catalonia, the Basque government, the Welsh government, have all invested. And while we do need more investment, I think what we need now is the application of the will to share the stuff that's already there and that's being created. So it's not a plea for money and drain the resources. It's a plea for, well, the infrastructure is there, all the software is there. Yes, we need more investment in speech technology. Yes, we need more investment in assistive technology for blind Welsh speakers, partially sighted. But there's a lot there that can be shared. So the answer is simply yes, and, well, share the love, basically.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? If not, I have one question on standardization, because it's mentioned everywhere, and it's a basis for certain things, but I mean, how do you go ahead in India and South Africa as well about imposing practically the standards, because standards are built but not used, and this is the experience, I think, from.
I think you've picked up the very right thread. We had a national standard right back in 1991 about text storage in ISKI, but it could never be implemented in spirit. And people build their data into the proprietary fonts, so that data is still held up within organizations, and people are not moving towards Unicode. Now Unicode, we have got it announced through the e-governance that whatever e-governance solutions are built, they will compulsorily follow the Unicode and the OpenType font standard. Legacy is there, which will move on gradually into the Unicode because of the need, because today Unicode has become a default standard of storage. And from OpenType fonts, we have built 22 language CDs one CD for each language containing OpenOffice, Firefox browser, completely localized, Thunderbird email client, completely localized, and we have distributed OpenType fonts on those CDs. So promotional measures are there. Then we are participating in the W3C initiative, and all the W3C standards underneath support Unicode. So we are trying to figure out whatever deficiencies are there in the standards, because standards are mostly Latin-centric. For Europe, probably those standards already address the needs. But for India, all the W3C standards need to be revisited. And from the internationalization perspective, we have to internationalize the standard itself. So we are trying to do those things. We have just started with this agenda, which is a very long agenda. And then on the speech side, we are trying to verify the IPA, because IPA exists. But for Indian languages, we seem to have some extra phonetic symbols. So we have done this IPA verification scientifically for one language called Bangla, in which we have identified 4 additional symbols. Now we are trying to verify it for 4 to 5 more Indian languages. And once we are convinced that these symbols are required, then we'll approach IPA also for addition of those symbols. So some of these basic enabler task is happening on the standards, which will definitely help the researchers in the long run.
If I could say something about standardization from a linguistic perspective, all of these languages, their orthographies are very much standardized in any case. The problem which we have with the languages at this point in time is the so-called adoptives that are coming into the language from English. Yes, it's not loanwords. We don't give it back. In any case, it has to be phonologized, and the problem is that's being done very ad hoc in the publishing industry, etc. Even so that on the Zulu page, web page of the Constitution of South Africa, the word cabinet, ikabineti, is written in 4 different formats. And those are things that obviously have implications for spelling checkers, etc., which have already been developed by South Africans for Microsoft, for instance, as well as for other open source as well. But then again, also trying to cooperate within TC37, also as a means of standardization.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, Hans.
So I have a question mainly to the representatives from South Africa and India, but actually what Jeremy said about the Welsh situation is maybe not too distant even. Yesterday it was pointed out that one way of arguing for the support of smaller languages would be to say they are very small and per capita it would be too expensive. And then it was pointed out, no, this is not a very good line of, that's not, because then you get people thinking about, oh, why should we pay for others and so on and so on. So, and especially, but if you do this argumentation from a different line that was suggested yesterday by the Lithuanian delegate, namely to say that the costs that you save by addressing this problem of treating the languages and taking care of language boundaries together, this is so immense, this cost saving, that you do it in a systematic and organized way. This is so the communal costs, not discussing who pays for what, but the total communal cost would be just much, much smaller. Do you have already the same line of argumentation within your own countries, because you probably also have to treat languages that are much smaller than others, and so do you have the same line of reasoning, or do you have already figures on that? And then we could maybe jump from that to what to the line of reasoning that Jeremy said, namely if we treat also many of these European languages in a big bunch, not calculate any costs individually for treating them, but say that's a big communal thing, and we cannot afford to leave anyone out, and we cannot afford to treat them separately. So maybe to Swaran and Justus, do you have any figures of that? Do you need to argue along these lines?
Thank you. Yes, Hans. In South Africa, we do have, as you say, a variation of the groups, comprising about 25 million people in the Nguni group, as to Venda and Tsonga, which is less than 1 million people. And but it's a very with us, it's a very political sensitivity. There's lots of political sensitivities, and therefore, at this point in time, the idea is basically to fund across the board for all of these languages. Although sometimes it's not that what's the word I'm looking for? It's not that cost effective, but the arguments are made on human language, on human what's specifically on the human rights. Sorry, so purely on human rights. That's the factor at this point in time. But as I say, it's split right across the border.
For us, there is a clear demarcation. Hindi being the official language of the country, it's spoken around 10 states and 2 union territories. So that becomes 40 to 50% of the Indian population uses Hindi. So that definitely becomes the first priority of funding. And also Hindi being Devanagari based, and there are 10 more languages which are Devanagari based. So whatever work is done for Hindi becomes a base for extending it to at least 8 to 9 languages.